Thousands of people have been killed in the war between Ethiopian and allied forces in the country's northern Tigray region. A de facto blockade on Tigray has triggered a humanitarian crisis and prevented the delivery of essential medical supplies. Ethiopia's Nobel Peace Prize winning Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says he will lead his country's army from the battlefront. We're joined by Senior Analyst on Ethiopia at the International Crisis Group, William Davison, who's in Brussels, and journalist and political commentator from Addis Ababa, Samuel Getachew. Good evening to both of you, and thank you so much for your time. Perhaps let's just begin with what is a simple but perhaps complex question. Why is there a war in Tigray? Let me begin with you, Samuel, given that you are in Addis Ababa.
Well, that's a tough question to answer. The Ethiopian side is insisting that its military base in Mekelle was attacked. But if you ask the other side, the TPLF, they would say that this attack was in, perhaps in opposition to the TPLF, which did not want to be part of the Ethiopian government. So this is a wage issue among Ethiopians, even among friends of Ethiopians. I mean, something that we're all watching closely and hoping this conflict that began a year ago will end soon, because again, it's not just the thousands that have been killed, it's also the millions that have been displaced as a result of it.
William?
It's not an easy question to answer in a short space of time, but essentially we had a very momentous shift of power in 2018 after anti-government protests. The TPLF, Tigray's ruling party, was pretty dominant in the federal government before that. When Abiy Ahmed came to power in 2018, the TPLF lost a lot of federal power. There was then a very bitter political falling out between former coalition partners, the TPLF and Prime Minister Abiy and his allies. And then last year there was a very serious electoral dispute when elections were delayed for COVID-19. Tigray's regional government, run by the TPLF, insisted on running regional elections autonomously in defiance of federal opportunity. And then we really saw a process of brinksmanship by both sides that took us to the point of conflict last November. And also, just for the record, I'm in Nairobi, not Brussels.
All right, no problem. Thank you for that correction, William. And just then to move on from the point where you do have these two entities that had previously been able to work together and had formed very close allegiances to now being at war with each other, how much more difficult, Samuel, does it make the process of trying to negotiate any kind of agreement that can end this war?
Well, according to the African Union envoy, the former president of Nigeria, Mr. Obasanjo, he has said that this is a political decision, a political consideration that has to take place. He has said all actors that are involved in this conflict recognize the fact that military action hasn't really solved the differences between the two sides. So we're going back to the political side. As you mentioned, there was a coalition in the past, but again, the differences between them, even the allegations between them, is day and night. One is accusing the other side of being a terrorist organization, while the other side is saying it is really creating something like genocide. So this is something that has been recognized by the United Nations with the help of the Ethiopian Human Rights Organization or Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, endorsing a report saying that all actors are guilty of some kind of action that they have taken in terms of abusing human rights. This is a conflict that has been defined by sexual exploitation. That's a fact. We've seen it up close. We've seen it from a distance. So again, we're hoping this will end very soon. Those of us that have traveled in these areas, including the three regions, including Tigray, Amhara, and Afar, not just as a professional journalist, but as a human beings, we hope it will end soon. Because once we know the faces behind these numbers, You've mentioned thousands, you've said hundreds of thousands. There are faces behind these numbers, and we've seen a glimpse of it, and it's really a shock. And when this is given, when this is reported, when a report is done, which the UN is, I'm hoping, is a down payment to the kind of report that we need, you'll be shocked. Because in Africa, we often mention of high numbers. We don't give faces, and this will shock the world.
And William, that's part of the difficulty here, because while a political solution is sought with the intervention of some of the regional leaders, you still have a situation where the lives of ordinary Ethiopians have been disrupted at an incredible level, and those who want to come in to offer some level of assistance are unable to do so right now.
Yes, that's right. I mean, the issue of humanitarian access has been a prominent feature of this conflict situation, also a prominent concern amongst the international community. I think, the conduct of the war by the Ethiopian federal forces, Amhara regional forces, and Eritrean national troops is also a massive issue. Those allegations of those sort of war crimes, atrocities that Samuel was talking about, the bulk of those are believed to have been committed by the forces I mentioned. And in terms of humanitarian access, when the federal government initially intervened to remove the TPLF from power, there was a sort of complete blockade on Tigray. We now have a similar situation after the Tigray forces, they fought back this year and took back control of the regional government. At the moment, we have severely restricted humanitarian access along one road corridor. We also have the federally provided electricity, telecoms, and banking services cut off, which is compounding those humanitarian problems inside Tigray for around 5 million people. The conflict has spread outside Tigray since July as the Tigray leaders try and overcome what they see as a siege, try and reclaim territory they lost during this conflict. That's obviously displaced more people, primarily in Amhara region. So there really is a devastating humanitarian situation. And until there is some pause in the fighting and some beginning of a restarting of a political process, unfortunately, it's actually very hard to see the sort of sustainable scaling up of humanitarian operations that we need, not least because of those federal restrictions I mentioned.
Do you think, William, that there have been different expectations on Abiy Ahmed in terms of how he would handle the outbreak of the violence, again, given the fact that he is a Nobel Peace Prize recipient, particularly just on the issue of having fostered peace before?
Yeah, yes, of course. But, I mean, there are now, and there always were, question marks about just how comprehensive and sustainable that peace process was with Eritrea, not least because it did nothing to resolve the differences between Eritrea's government and the leaders in Tigray, which is now part of the conflict that we're seeing. But, I mean, what we have to understand here, as Samuel was referring to, is the TPLF is classified as a terrorist organization. The federal government justified the intervention for various reasons, partly, but mainly because they said, the TPLF attacked those federal military bases. Now the TPLF side says, the Tigrayan side says that they've suffered a genocide, hence justifying, their operations, their military advances at the moment. So the point here is that both sides see legitimacy and that their war is a just war. So this is just part of the political polarization, the absolutely massive gulf in perceptions that characterizes this war and indeed makes it so hard to come to a resolution of it.
All right, let's leave it there for tonight. Let me thank you both for your time. William Davison, and he is a senior analyst on Ethiopia at the International Crisis Group, and Samuel Getachew, a journalist and political commentator. He, of course, live for us from Addis Ababa.